Once, in the shadow of a fallen kingdom, there lived a young prince named Mephibosheth. He was born into the house of Jonathan, the beloved son of King Saul. Before sorrow touched his life, the palace halls echoed with laughter, and servants bowed when he passed. He was a child of promise, a boy destined for honor, strength, and royal privilege. But destiny can change in a single night. The news came like thunder crashing through the palace walls. Saul and Jonathan had fallen in battle. Israel trembled with fear. The enemies were advancing, and panic swept through the royal household like a raging fire. Mephibosheth was only 5 years old. His nurse grabbed him tightly and fled the palace in terror. Her feet pounded against the stone floors as cries filled the air behind them. She ran with the desperation of someone trying to outrun death itself. But in her haste she stumbled. The child fell. A scream pierced the air. By the time the nurse lifted him again, everything had changed forever. The prince could no longer walk. That single moment shattered his future. The years that followed were cruel and silent. The grandson of a king became forgotten. The son of Jonathan vanished from the memories of many. While warriors fought for power and kingdoms rose around him, Mephibosheth disappeared into a place called LoDebar, a barren land whose very name carried the taste of emptiness. LoDebar was dry, isolated, and broken, much like the man who lived there. Every morning, Mephibosheth woke with the same ache in his heart. He remembered stories of his father Jonathan, brave and loyal, loved by David. He remembered fragments of the palace before tragedy destroyed everything. Yet memories became painful companions. They reminded him of what he had lost. He often stared into the distance, wondering why God had allowed his life to collapse before it had truly begun. People whispered when they saw him, "There goes the crippled prince, the last branch of Saul's family. He has nothing left." Mephibosheth carried shame like a heavy chain around his neck. In ancient times, disability often invited rejection. Many believed weakness meant disgrace. Though he had royal blood in his veins, he felt less than human. Still, deep inside him, a flicker of hope refused to die. If you are enjoying this story so far, pause for a moment and make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Stories from the Bible carry timeless lessons, and your support helps more people discover them. Also, comment below and tell me where you are watching from tonight. Years passed. Meanwhile, David became king over Israel. He conquered enemies, strengthened the kingdom, and established Jerusalem as the city of power. Songs were sung about him in the streets. Warriors celebrated his victories. The nation prospered under his rule. Yet amid all his success, David remembered a promise. Long ago, before battles and crowns separated them, Jonathan had asked David to show kindness to his family forever. David had sworn an oath before God that he would never forget. Many kings erased the families of former rulers because they fear rebellion. In those days, descendants of old kings were often hunted down and killed. Mephibosheth knew this. That fear haunted him every night. He lived quietly, hoping no one would notice he still existed. Then one ordinary day everything changed. The sound of horses approached LoDebar. Dust rose in the distance. Servants stepped outside nervously as royal soldiers entered the village. Their armor gleamed beneath the sun. Villagers froze in fear. No royal messenger ever came to LoDebar without purpose. A servant shouted, "We are searching for Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan." Fear rushed through Mephibosheth like ice water. His hands trembled. His mind raced. The king has finally remembered Saul's family, he thought. This is the end. He could barely breathe as soldiers entered his dwelling. Their leader stood tall and stern. "The king summons you," he said. No explanation. No comfort. Only a command. Mephibosheth felt his heart sink. He imagined execution waiting for him in Jerusalem. He imagined chains, humiliation, perhaps death itself. Still, he had no choice. The journey to Jerusalem felt endless. Every sound of the wagon wheels deepened his anxiety. He avoided looking at the soldiers escorting him. Questions tormented him. Why now? What does David want? Will I survive this journey? At last, the city appeared before him. Jerusalem stood majestic beneath the sunlight. Towers rose proudly into the sky. Crowds filled the streets. Merchants shouted. Soldiers marched. Music drifted through the air. But Mephibosheth noticed none of the beauty. Fear consumed him. He was brought into the palace courts where polished floors reflected golden light. The same kind of palace he once knew as a child now felt terrifying and foreign. Then the doors opened. King David sat upon his throne. The mighty warrior who defeated Goliath. The ruler of Israel. The king whom nations feared. Mephibosheth lowered himself to the ground immediately. His face pressed against the floor. He expected judgment. Instead, he heard something unexpected. Mephibosheth. David's voice carried warmth. The crippled man slowly looked up. "Do not be afraid," David said gently. "I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan." Those words struck Mephibosheth harder than any sword ever could. Kindness? Why would a king show kindness to him? David continued speaking. "I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you shall always eat at my table." Mephibosheth stared in disbelief. His lips trembled. Tears filled his eyes. Then he spoke words revealing years of pain buried inside him. "What is your servant, that you should notice a dead dog like me?" That sentence exposed the wounds hidden in his heart. Mephibosheth no longer saw himself as a prince. He saw himself as worthless, broken, forgotten, unwanted. But David did not see him that way. The king honored him publicly. Servants were assigned to work his land. Saul's inheritance was restored to him. Most importantly, Mephibosheth was welcomed into the royal table as family. Not as an enemy. Not as a burden. As family. Imagine that moment. Every evening, the king's sons gathered at the table. Powerful men sat in places of honor. Warriors and officials entered the hall proudly. Then Mephibosheth came too. When he sat at the table, his crippled feet disappeared beneath the covering of the king's tablecloth. There he looked no different from anyone else. Grace covered what shame once exposed. That is one of the most beautiful pictures in all of Scripture. Sometimes life drops us unexpectedly. Sometimes pain steals dreams before they bloom. Sometimes people forget us. But God never forgets the broken. Mephibosheth thought his story ended in LoDebar. God was preparing a table in Jerusalem. And maybe someone listening right now feels forgotten too. Maybe people walked away from you. Maybe life injured your confidence. Maybe your dreams collapsed suddenly, and you wonder whether your best days are gone. But this story reminds us that God can restore what pain tried to bury. If this message is touching your heart, take a second to like this video and subscribe for more powerful Bible stories. And don't forget to comment where you're watching from. I always love seeing people from different nations gathering around stories of faith and hope. Though David honored Mephibosheth, life inside the palace was not always easy. Pain leaves scars even after blessings arrive. Some nights, Mephibosheth sat quietly in his chamber remembering LoDebar. Strange as it seemed, loneliness had become familiar there. Now he lived among royalty again. Yet insecurity still whispered in his ear. "You do not belong here. You are weak. One day they will cast you out." He watched other men walk confidently through palace halls while servants carried him where he needed to go. Every limp reminded him of the fall that changed his destiny. Sometimes he avoided looking at his own reflection. One evening, after dining at the king's table, Mephibosheth lingered while others left. Candles flickered softly against the stone walls. David noticed the sadness in his eyes. "Why do you stay behind tonight?" David asked. Mephibosheth hesitated. Then honesty poured out. "My king," he said quietly, "I still feel like the frightened child who lost everything. Even surrounded by kindness, I struggle to believe I deserve it." David looked at him carefully. "The kindness I show you is not earned," the king replied. "It is rooted in covenant. I loved your father, and because of that love I chose you." Those words settled deeply into Mephibosheth's soul. Grace is difficult to accept when you believe you are unworthy. Yet that is the mystery of mercy. David never demanded that Mephibosheth prove himself first. He simply welcomed him. Days became months. Months became years. Gradually Mephibosheth found healing in unexpected places. Palace servants treated him with dignity. David's household accepted him. Children greeted him warmly in the courtyards. For the first time since childhood, he laughed freely again. He even became a father himself. A son named Micah was born to him. Holding his child for the first time stirred emotions too deep for words. Tears slipped down his face as he whispered prayers of gratitude to God. The broken prince who once hid in fear now held new life in his arms. Yet peace never lasts forever in human history. Trouble rose again within David's own household. Absalom, David's handsome and ambitious son, rebelled against his father. He stole the hearts of many Israelites and declared himself king. Jerusalem plunged into chaos as David fled the city for safety. Fear spread quickly. People chose sides carefully because survival depended on loyalty. During this dark moment, Mephibosheth faced another painful test. A servant named Ziba betrayed him. Ziba went ahead to meet David while the king fled Jerusalem. He brought supplies and falsely claimed that Mephibosheth had stayed behind hoping Saul's kingdom would return to him. David, exhausted and wounded emotionally by betrayal from his own son, believed the report immediately. In anger, he gave all of Mephibosheth's property to Ziba. Far away, Mephibosheth knew nothing about the conversation. When he finally learned what had happened, grief overwhelmed him. Not because of the lost land but because David believed he had been disloyal. Loyalty mattered deeply to him. His father Jonathan had once risked everything for David. Mephibosheth cherished that bond between their families. To be accused of betrayal wounded him deeply. Yet he could not quickly pursue David because of his disability and the confusion surrounding the rebellion. So he waited. Days stretched painfully into weeks. Jerusalem remained tense. Whispers filled every street. Would David return? Would Absalom succeed? Would blood flood the kingdom again? Then news arrived. Absalom was dead. David was returning to Jerusalem. The city prepared anxiously for the king's arrival. Crowds gathered near the roads. Leaders rushed to greet him and secure favor. Among them came Mephibosheth. But his appearance shocked everyone. His clothes were dirty. His beard was untrimmed. His body showed signs of mourning. From the day David left Jerusalem until the day he returned safely, Mephibosheth had lived in sorrow. When David saw him, confusion crossed the king's face. "Why did you not go with me?" he asked. Mephibosheth answered carefully and honestly. "My servant deceived me. Because I am lame, I could not travel quickly on my own. Yet he slandered me before my lord the king." Then he added words revealing remarkable humility. "My lord the king is like an angel of God. Do whatever seems good to you." There was no bitterness in his voice. No demand for revenge. No desperate defense of wealth. David listened silently. Perhaps guilt stirred within him as he realized he had judged too quickly. Trying to resolve the conflict, David declared that the land would be divided between Mephibosheth and Ziba. But Mephibosheth's response revealed the transformation that grace had worked inside him over the years. "Let him take everything," he said. "Now that my lord the king has returned safely." What mattered most to him was not property. It was relationship. The frightened prince from LoDebar had become a man who valued loyalty above possessions. His heart had changed. That moment remains one of the quietest yet most powerful scenes in Scripture. Mephibosheth had every reason to become bitter. Life crippled him physically. Tragedy stole his childhood. Fear haunted his early years. False accusations later damaged his reputation. Yet somehow grace softened him instead of hardening him. Many people become angry after suffering. They build walls around their hearts. They trust nobody. They expect betrayal everywhere. Mephibosheth chose another path. He remained humble, faithful, grateful, and that is why his story still speaks across generations. Maybe you know what it feels like to fall unexpectedly. Maybe your pain came through betrayal, loss, sickness, rejection, or disappointment. Maybe you carry invisible wounds nobody understands. Like Mephibosheth, perhaps you sometimes feel hidden away in your own version of LoDebar. But remember this. Your brokenness does not cancel your value. Your scars do not erase your identity. And your difficult beginning does not determine your final chapter. David sought Mephibosheth because of covenant love. In the same way, God seeks the forgotten, the wounded, and the rejected with relentless mercy. The world often celebrates strength, beauty, wealth, and influence. Yet throughout Scripture, God repeatedly lifts the overlooked. A shepherd boy became king. A prisoner became governor of Egypt. A poor widow saved a prophet. Fishermen became apostles. And a crippled prince became a living testimony of grace. That is the beauty of God's kingdom. He sees what others ignore. If you are still watching, thank you for staying through this emotional journey. Go ahead and subscribe if you love inspiring Bible stories like this one. Leave a comment below telling me your country or city. I truly enjoy reading every single one and seeing how far these stories reach around the world. As years continued, Mephibosheth became known not merely as Saul's grandson, but as a man transformed by mercy. Young servants in the palace heard his story often. Parents told their children about the prince who lost everything and found grace at the king's table. Some evenings, Mephibosheth himself shared memories of Jonathan with David's sons. His voice softened whenever he spoke of his father. He was brave, Mephibosheth would say. But more than that, he was faithful. David listened carefully whenever Jonathan's name arose. Time had not erased the pain of losing his dearest friend. Sometimes sorrow still flickered in his eyes when memories surfaced. One quiet night, David and Mephibosheth sat together overlooking Jerusalem. Torches glowed across the city like scattered stars. David spoke first. "Your father once saved my life." Mephibosheth lowered his eyes respectfully. "He loved you deeply, my king." David nodded slowly. "I see his heart reflected in you." Those words meant more to Mephibosheth than any land or title ever could. All his life he feared being remembered only for weakness. Yet now he was recognized for faithfulness. That is what grace does. It restores dignity. The older Mephibosheth grew, the more he understood something important. His story was never truly about disability or royalty. It was about undeserved kindness. He had done nothing to earn David's favor. He simply received it. That realization filled him with gratitude for the rest of his days.